don't know me, even before Pam introduced me, as I was standing up here drinking my coffee, you probably had good, bad, or indifferent, some impression, okay? So here's a couple of guys, and you form some impressions there, right? Biker, physician, cool guy, nerd, all right? And it just depends upon the order in which you put these. So this first impression is really important, okay? What's the first thing the reviewer reads, typically? Some of you have been in a position as a reviewer. What do you think the first thing is that the reviewer reads when they've got their full proposal?
The title.
Title? Yeah, that's a given. The second, sorry.
The abstract.
The abstract, the summary, the thing that sums it up, right? That's the first thing they read. They just want to get a feeling for it. The abstract or the summary. So that's the first thing the reviewer reads. And remember this first impressions. What's the last thing you write, typically? You're sick with this thing. You finally got the narrative there. You got everything in place. Oh, God, I've got to write an abstract. I've got to write an abstract. When you're tired, when you're sick of it. So here's the imbalance. The first thing the reviewer reads and makes that first impression on is the last thing that you write when you just want to be rid of the whole thing. So I usually try and give myself a couple of days. And I go on to a completely different project. It's kind of like wine in a bottle. It'll either improve or not with age, but it will probably change. And so come back to it and write that abstract. One of the former science editors told me one time in a conversation, the abstract's the most important part of your manuscript. And they actually, the cynical reader here, in fact, this guy, one of the sub-editors of Science magazine, arguably the first or second best science magazine or science journal in the world, said that they would get this stack of papers. Now it's all done electronically, but they would get the stack of papers, and he would scan the abstract. Nah, maybe, nah, just on the base of the abstract. That was the triage that was done on that manuscript, based on the abstract. And what did I say the last thing that you write is when you're tired of it? Yeah, right, okay. So give yourself some time. Write the abstract and summary when you're fresh and feeling enthusiastic. Maybe you need to go back, you've written this whole proposal, go back and look at your budget. Yeah, probably in the spring, that would be nice. And get that enthusiasm and then go back and read or write that abstract. Creating your abstract, I like using headers in the proposal to get started. So sometimes it's really hard to do this. And so what I do is don't try and write the abstract de novo. But if I've got a header that says how to make a Starbucks widget, I will just take that header and put it up there in the abstract. And then I realize I've at least got to say something about that. And so I kind of deconstruct the proposal by putting things into the abstract to write it. Expand on the purpose and the outcome. It's not the place for the details. Simple, compelling, concise. It's your elevator speech. That abstract is your elevator speech. So, you've got that abstract done. You actually took the time. You've got a really, really tight proposal. You think you're finished. Nope. Don't take my word for it. Polish, polish, polish. Version 15 if needed. I think I've created monsters in my laboratory because now my graduate students, when they turn in versions of their proposal or their thesis or a manuscript, I'll see things like V16 because that's the convention that I use. So I'm, first of all, really compulsive about saving stuff, and sometimes I actually go back to something I didn't think was very good in the second or third version, and I know I've written a sentence that now works in 22 or something like this. So polish, polish, polish. I've got a bunch of yellow sticky notes. I now do that virtually. And what I do is as I'm writing this proposal, it's almost subliminal. And I'll hear myself saying, Warren, at the beginning of the proposal, you said something a little different than that. I don't interrupt my train of thought any more than to write a sticky note. Check first paragraph for X. And put that up there, and then I go back to what I'm doing. So when I'm finished writing, And I've got these, I go back and polish. Because what you don't want to do is say X in the first paragraph and Y in the last paragraph. So I'll go through and do that. Eat, sleep, revise, and repeat. Takes time. How about that? I do a dedicated pass. By pass, I mean going through the whole proposal to put what I call sizzle in the steak. Okay, you want people to be as excited about this as you are. And you don't want to serve up a cold Jell-O. This is the sort of stuff my mother, I loved her dearly, but she would do this on Thanksgivings and Christmas. Anyway, because it usually had floating fruit stuff in it too. You can see that here, okay? You don't want that to be served. What you want is a really nice, even there's vegan equivalents, I'm sure, something that's got a sizzle in it. So I do specific passes for specific reasons. So I'm sitting there, and I really kind of put blinders on for all the mistakes that I know are in this proposal. And what I do is, for example, I'll do what I call a hyperbole pass. And this really sounds weird, I know. But I may have written, my good idea might be of interest to you, so I wonder if you might think about funding this. Okay, that doesn't sound unreasonable. Except everybody else who's putting in a proposal to this program is saying this is a really important, great idea that you must fund. So I do what I call a hyperbole pass. So I look for words that I've written that are good, new, useful, interesting, effect, need, period. And where appropriate, without going over the top, I put in great, novel, vitally important, fascinating, impact, requirement, exclamation mark. Again, if I'm not conveying that I think this is really interesting and important, why should I expect the reviewer to? So I literally do a hyperbole pass. And I might even look in my Word document for the word good. And I'll then go through and judge, do I really want to use good? Or, not earth-shaking or things like that. You can obviously go too far. Usually what I do is I go through and put in these hyperboles until I'm just about ready to throw up myself at reading it, and then I back off a little bit. But the point is that I do try and emphasize those things. I do a redundancy pass. If I find myself saying many, 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 then just to kind of spice up that writing, I put in many, several, lots, multiple. These are just examples. You can think of your own examples. I do a pass for, remember I showed the blinders on the horse there? I do a pass in which I'm only looking for punctuation. I do a pass through the whole proposal, I'm only looking at spelling. I'm looking for that little red squiggly line. Font, figures, etc. Because, at least for me, maybe you're more organized or can get your head around all of this, but I find that if I go through the proposal and I'm looking to see if the punctuation is right, the spelling is right, the figures are aligned, the font is correct, it just gets to be all too much and I miss stuff. Okay. I was so disturbed at this proposal, NSF proposal that I got rejected. I had a typo in the first sentence of the narrative. I have no idea. I must have just, hit something and it inserted this letter. And one reviewer said it was like a knife to my heart and made me feel like a hypocrite talking to you here about the importance of this. It said, there's typos in this proposal. It looks like Bergman may be spread too thin. Oh, man. So, make sure it is perfect and beyond perfect when you put it in. It is just so hard to not see this. In the old days, when proofreaders would actually proof book pages or manuscripts or even newspaper print and things like that, the prose would start at the lower right. And of course, in Western literature tradition, we start at the upper left and read across like that. the prose would start at the lower right, and they would read backwards and up. Because what they would see would be groups of words that made no sense. But if you read from the upper right, you see pork and beans. Okay, that's what you kind of process, even though that's not what it actually is. Peer review, really, really important. Okay, this is often what we see when we look in the mirror. But in fact, it's hard, it's even embarrassing to expose your potential weaknesses. And the more I've been in this game, the more embarrassing, the harder it is. But I find the lesson in humility is useful for my students, and they give me damn good advice as well. So I'll find anybody who will read my stuff and say, tear it apart. In fact, there's one person in this audience in whom I said, take extensive notes, tell me what I'm doing wrong in this workshop. Okay, I mentioned Johns Hopkins before. Nice little university on the East Coast. $2.4 billion annually. They acquire something like 2% of all federal funding goes to this one university. And why? So, we write a grant proposal, or we, as faculty, write a paper, and we say, okay, I got this ready, we upload it to the journal website, send it out for review. You can't do that at Johns Hopkins. Any paper you produce, any proposal you read, has to be vetted first by an internal faculty committee. And only when that internal faculty committee says, okay, this might be good enough to go to a journal, are you allowed to actually get it outside of the university. Now, think of changing our culture to do that. I mean, there would be a riot if we did that. But this is just what Johns Hopkins does. They have this peer review. And you know what? You probably got to build a couple of weeks into this. Because I can't go to Ed Mager, my colleague in biology, and say, Ed, I want to send this in Monday. Would you devote your weekend to reading my manuscript, please? I'd really appreciate it. Okay, it just doesn't happen. So again, another instance of time that you need. So eat, sleep, revise, and repeat. And after peer review, it seems like you're right back here because you've gone through it and you've made this seemingly perfect document. And now your friends and colleagues, maybe even your mother, is saying, here are all the problems with your proposal. Finally, you think, maybe this really is ready to submit. And don't wait until 6 o'clock or 20 seconds to 6. This actually happened to me, but I started to submit this proposal at 10 in the morning, okay? Bad error request number 400. I kept getting the server error. And you know, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong, right? And it turned out that what was happening was that on one line, on one page, I had one symbol, special symbol, which the server would not process. And so it kept kicking it out. So you can imagine how many years it would take off your life if you got this message at 10 minutes to 6 and started trying to figure out what it is. So don't wait until the last minute to submit. If something can go wrong, it will. Okay, how are we doing? I just got a couple more minutes. I'm not going to abuse your Friday afternoon. Just a couple of things really quickly. If your proposal is rejected, you know, the inclination is, damn, throw it out. Don't do that. Don't do that. You've got a lot of energy invested, and it's probably a really good proposal. NSF now is funding, in fact, this may be generous, something like 10 or 15% of proposals. Way more proposals going in, less money, relatively speaking, available. And so you've got to be in here for the long haul. The average NSF proposal is submitted, I think it's 2.4 times. It's probably higher now, I imagine. This could be a number that's a few years old. I was talking to Hannah Carey, a very distinguished scholar and leader, one of the first women elected to be president of the 50,000 strong American Physiological Society. Extremely successful woman. Also sings in a rock band, so she can't be bad at all, right? But I asked her permission. She was telling me the story, and I asked her permission. She said, sure, if it helps people. She submitted an NSF proposal 7 times before it became funded. 7 times. But she stuck with it, and she finally got that proposal funded. So it takes perseverance. If your proposal is funded, is rejected, if your proposal is rejected, do whatever it is that brings you solace briefly. Anybody know who this guy is? He's sort of the Mexican Elvis Presley. So your bad memories will fade out. As we say here in Texas, if you're bucked off the saddle, climb right back into it. And maybe I get this from my grandfather. This is him sitting on a horse. The horse is fine. He just trained it to lay down so he could sit on it. This was during the Calgary Stampede. So can you submit a revised proposal? If yes, revise it. Don't hit that reset button. Don't throw it out. You've got good stuff there, and you've got a tightrope. Too few changes, too many changes. You want to try and get just the right sort of amount there. Call the reviewer's bluff if you have an opportunity and it's allowed. And it's sort of like, you rejected my previous proposal because I had a red microscope slide instead of a blue microscope slide. I am now going to use a blue microscope slide. And unspoken is, I'm calling your bluff. You said you didn't fund my proposal because I was using red instead of blue. Now I'm using blue. What's your excuse? Okay, so put a little section in. NIH actually requires that you put in something showing how you've changed the proposal. The National Science Foundation and many other proposals don't require that. But you see, the reviewers may not even know that this is a resubmitted proposal. There may be nothing that identifies it as that. And what you want to do is capitalize upon their guilt that they rejected you last time. But if they don't know that this is a resubmission, right? So what you can do is say, in response to a previous submission, this has been heavily revised and improved. I mean, that could be just a statement at the beginning. You want some way to let the reviewer know that you've taken their responses seriously. Can you resubmit? No, find another place for your proposal. Remember this one? Considered to be non-responsive. Warren Bergman was crushed at this and embarrassed. I had tequila, as I've just recommended, and I found, hey, wait, there's 2 other places at NSF that can take this. And there's a place that the National Institutes of Health that this might work for. And then I found an American Heart Association. And you know where this American Heart Association opportunity came from? From Pivot. I thought I knew AHA in and out. But there's this new program they came up with, and Pivot brought it to my attention. Okay, just about finished here. I've actually talked to people who say, I've written 11 proposals in the last 18 months and I'm still not funded. And I'm saying, just a minute here. How much time did you spend on each proposal? So if you take my formula, which is personal, it may not work for everybody, but if it takes 15 days to write a 15-page review, and you've cranked out 11 of these, and you've got a job, by the way, as a professor, how much time are you spending on each proposal? And so I really advocate not a shotgun approach. Don't spray a bunch of proposals out there. Really have a targeted couple, 3, 4 proposals over a year or 2 that really are going to hit the mark. And I think that's a much better strategy than just saying, I'm going to put a bunch of proposals out there. This isn't statistics. Okay, it's not probability. It's not that if you flip the dice enough times, you'll get 8 ones in a row or something like that. And then, if you had a proposal rejected, change direction somewhat. It's really hard to give up these old ideas. But I told you, now maybe this is moving into catharsis now, in which I talk about, I can't believe they didn't fund that proposal. But I got this proposal rejected, and after been thinking about it for a while, I thought, I've got some new technology, some new ideas. I think I'm going to go back to NSF. I'm going to go back to the same panel, but I got a new idea. And suddenly I found myself really energized by this new idea, which was different than what I've been proposing for several years and getting some funding for doing. And so don't be reluctant to give up that old idea. Okay, to summarize, and then this is just my view of it. It takes a winning idea. You can't put mediocre ideas out there in this environment and expect to get funded. It takes passion, and I hope in some ways I've shown you that I have passion for, not just for getting my own proposals funded, but for seeing all of you be successful. It takes persistence. Wow, does it take persistence. Remember Hannah Carey, American Physiological Society president, 7 submissions of a proposal. Have a sophisticated plan. Think of some of these extra embellishments that will differentiate you from the competition. Hard work, that goes without saying. And you didn't think I'd get through this without one more time indicating that it takes a lot of time to write a winning proposal. So, this was a buffet. Maybe some of you are totally stuffed because you took everything out of every dish. Some of you may just have sampled a few different aspects of it. I really hope that something in here was of value to you. I'm happy to have follow-up, not now, but at some point, if you've got questions for me. I think you're probably all anxious to start your proposal. There is my email, old school, been here almost 20 years now, so it's just last name @unt.edu. And I realize some of you may now have to leave, and that's fine. I would really appreciate it if you do even hurriedly fill out that evaluation. And now, for as long as people want to stay here, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I have a question.
Yes?
I just got my PhD last year, so I'm
Oh,
brand new.
congratulations, that's
Thank
great.
you. I survived.
Yeah.
Okay, and I put a grant application in and came second, so I didn't get it.
Oh.
But they actually called me and told me, listen, we gave it to somebody else, and the reason why is that